Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to Creating a Scientific Superpower. I'm Tim Burke. I'm the Deputy Editor at EG Magazine, and we are very proud to be partnering on today's event with Bidwell's. Thank you, too, to our sponsors, British Land, Advanced Research Clusters and Pinsent Masons, and to the UK Science Park Association and One Nucleus for their support of today's event. We have a packed day of panels and presentations for you, as I'm sure you've seen on the agenda, exploring how to ensure the potential in the UK's science and technology industries is unlocked, particularly in the Oxford-Cambridge arc, so that a region that's already achieved and contributed so much continues to thrive, promotes partnership, and helps cement the UK's place on the global stage. A few quick housekeeping notes from me. We would love you all to be able to ask questions of our panelists and presenters throughout the day. Many of you have done that already and registered questions with us, but you can continue to do so via Slido. There will be a code on screen that lets you do that. And we have some mics roving the room as well if you want to go old school and just hold your hand up and ask in person. If you're using Slido, there is free Wi-Fi that you can use here, but goes without saying, please keep your phone on silent while you're in the main room here. Just finally, there is no fire drill planned, so if you do hear an alarm, please make your way to the fire exits. I'm going to do my best air steward impression, but there's one just over on that side of the room, and you've got another towards the back on that side. We'll have our opening keynote in just a moment, but first I'd like to ask Bryan, Head of Science and Technology at Bidwell's, to say a few words as well. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Creating a Scientific Superpower, a hugely ambitious title. So hopefully you're all intrigued and wanting to deliver on this goal for the UK. The science and technology sectors are now often top of the news agenda, with life sciences becoming mainstream for everyone. Over the last couple of years, we've all become kind of odd job scientists, whether regular swab testing, managing our own quarantine environments, even if all just to escape away on holiday. The growing public interest in science is super, but how to power up enterprise in the sector, we surely need to harness the talent, ideas and capital, deliver on infrastructure, and all within a supportive government framework. So UK research and development expertise and performance has the attention of the world. But what we are asking here today is what catalysts are needed to supercharge its performance. So at Bidwell's, over the past 2 years, we've seen the step change in investor interest for science and technology real estate. Investment has been driven by international capital, often new entrants keen to learn about how local real estate has supported science and ready with its capital and ideas to potentially do it better. Significant real estate deals are taking place aplenty, and life science news now also often tops the real estate headlines too. Concurrently, the end-user occupier demand for offices, R&D and lab space just grows relentlessly. Lab space demand in Cambridge up over 300% since the beginning of the pandemic. So this is great news, businesses wanting to scale and grow. But there are also risks. Only last Thursday, I can tell you about a less positive conversation I had with an exciting new biotech leading research on targeted protein rescue. Having been thwarted just too many times to secure the elusive lab space they need quickly in Cambridge, they've abandoned their UK search. Their science, their key talent, will now grow in the US. Competition in science is fierce, so to be a superpower, we need to have the best environments on all strands. So, given all of this interest, Bidwell's thought it would be a good idea to try our own little experiment, and this is to bring together here in London, on the doorstep of political power, a combination of real estate developers, UK science business leaders and investors, plus representatives from academia and government, and put them together to try and challenge and identify what needs to be done to maximise all this untapped potential. So I hope you really enjoyed the programme today. We have a fantastic set of speakers and panellists, and before I allow you to get to them, I just have some brief thanks. Firstly, to all of you for attending. And also, even our non-human attendees, if you've seen the robots, they're kindly provided by Smart City Consultancy, Cranfield, and UV Robots. Bidwells also would like to thank our partners, EG, and also event-sponsored Advanced Research Clusters and British Land and Pinsent Masons. So, to kick off today's programme, building new partnerships and industries to tackle global challenges. An individual who has propelled UK science forward, working across industry and academia, the Pro Vice-Chancellor for Innovation and Professor of Translational Medicine at Oxford University. I'm very pleased to welcome Professor Chaz Bounter.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and thank you for coming. So what I'd like to do is make 4 points. The first one is, I believe together we can do amazing things. So let me just share a couple of stories from Oxford, UK, over the past couple of years. When the pandemic hit us, a couple of years ago, within the university, many of our senior colleagues, our Regius Professor John Bell, the Vice Chancellor Louise Richardson, got together with colleagues from government. They got together with colleagues from the regulators, the UK regulators. They got together with funders from Wellcome and Gates. And importantly, they got together with industry, so AstraZeneca, Pascal Swarrow and Mene Pangloss. And together, a couple of years ago, they said, how can we produce a vaccine as quickly as possible? And in the university, we said, we're not interested in making profit. We just need to create a vaccine to get the world out of this pandemic. And to me, it is staggering what my colleagues in the space of 9 months did to produce a vaccine, something that would normally take 9 years. It's phenomenal what we can do together. The second story was the recovery trial. So a couple of our superstar scientists, Martin Landray, Peter Horby, they worked with lots of clinicians across the NHS and of course thousands of patients across the UK. And 2 years ago they started this recovery trial, which was basically looking to see if any existing drugs had any benefit against COVID. And of course they showed, first of all, that hydroxychloroquine, the anti-malaria drug, was completely ineffective. Then they showed that dexamethasone, a very cheap generic anti-inflammatory that's found in every chemist up and down the country, was very effective. It reduced deaths by about 1/3 in people that required supplemental oxygen or ventilation. And then they showed that tocilizumab was also effective, again in patients that had inflammation or required ventilation. Now with the dexamethasone, I remember on June the 16th, 2 years ago, the Prime Minister at lunchtime got up to announce that dexamethasone was effective. By that evening, it had become policy, and by that weekend, it was saving lives. And that one finding during the pandemic has saved more than 1 million lives. Dexamethasone during COVID saved more than 1 million lives. So again, the lessons in this country, we've got a wonderful NHS, we've got wonderful clinicians, and if we come together, it's amazing what we can do. The second point I'd like to make is that the world is facing some massive challenges. So I work in the healthcare space, so I worry a lot about many healthcare conditions. I worry about cancer. In the UK, 350,000 people get diagnosed with cancer every year. That's 1,000 people every day. So today, 1,000 people are going to get diagnosed with cancer. In the UK, we've got 850,000 people with dementia. In 2050, that number is going to be 2.1 million. We're going to have 2 cities the size of Birmingham with dementia. I worry about aging. We've got aging societies. In the next 20 years, we're going to see a 180% increase in the number of pensioners with cancer and a 120% increase in the number of pensioners with diabetes. You're talking about a tripling and a doubling. I worry about antimicrobial resistance. Across the world today, 700,000 people a year are dying because they are resistant to existing antibiotics. And by 2050, that number is going to be 10 million if we don't come up with a new generation. Rare diseases, there's 7,000 rare diseases. If you add up all the patients across the world, that's 350 million patients. Half of those are kids. 30% of them will not reach the age of 5. And 95% of those patients, 95%, have no treatment whatsoever. So I worry about a lot of these healthcare challenges. But an even bigger challenge facing the planet is the climate emergency. You know, in the past couple of years, we've seen fires in Australia, in Siberia, in Portugal, in California, in Brazil. They're now raging in Spain. We've seen flooding in New York. We've seen flooding in London. We've seen flooding in New Orleans. We've seen 52 degrees in Vancouver. We've seen roads melting in India. The climate emergency is on us. We don't have 20, 30 years to sort it out. We need to sort it out quickly. So we've got some massive challenges facing us all. Now, I feel very optimistic that in the UK, we can tackle these challenges. I think we need to create new industries. I'm a little envious in the US. On the doorstep of Stanford, there are at least 5 companies that are worth more than $1 trillion. So Apple is about 2.6, Microsoft about 2.3, Alphabet, Google about 2, Amazon about 1.7, and Tesla 1. And all 5 of these companies have been set up roughly in the past 2 decades, and they're worth more than $1 trillion. In the UK, we have no company worth $1 trillion. In Europe, we have no company worth $1 trillion. Now, those companies, they have created new industries. They have created hundreds of thousands of jobs. They've produced, frankly, probably thousands of millionaires, and they've produced a few tens of billionaires. We need to create new industries to tackle some of these big challenges that we're facing in the UK and that the planet is facing. Now, I'm optimistic that we can do this in the UK, and I'm optimistic because we've got amazing universities. We've got a wonderful NHS. We've got some amazing infrastructures and resources like the catapults, the UK Biobank, the Sanger Centre. But I also am excited because we are an entrepreneurial country, and we do have actually a lot of innovation funding. We have more funding for innovation or venture creation per head than anywhere else in Europe. We may not have as much as the US, but we have a lot compared to most countries. And I do increasingly believe that funding is global. It's fluid. People, if they're sitting on the West Coast, all they're looking for is good ideas and great talent, and they will invest. So I think we have to be optimistic. So I think my final comment is, let's work together. Let's create new industries. Let's solve some of the big global challenges. And in the process, let's help the UK economy. Thank you very much.
Chaz, thank you so much for that. And Chaz is going to stay to join our first panel discussion today on unleashing the UK's innovation potential. I think this is going to set the scene for quite a lot of today's discussions. How can government, industry, and academia come together to drive innovation and push forward the ARC's position as the engine room for the country's science and technology industries? Also happy to have joining us, if I could invite them to the stage, Professor Karen Holford, Vice-Chancellor at Cranfield University, Richard O'Boyle, Chief Executive at Pioneer Group, and Dr. Andrea Kells, Director for Research Ecosystem at Technology Group ARM. Thank you very much for joining us. Chaz, could we delve into that notion of partnership that we were talking about, particularly at the start there of your speech? What at the moment are the stumbling blocks that stand in the way of encouraging collaboration between different industries, between different parts of the economy? And how might we be able to look at the ARC as giving us a blueprint to overcoming some of those?
I mean, I'm obviously a great fan of collaboration. I mean, I realize that sitting in Oxford, I sit in a very privileged environment. So just before chatting with Karen, I was saying, you know, we have undoubtedly great researchers and great students and great faculty. We have lots of infrastructure and lots of resources. We have a great brand name, a great convening power. But Oxford can't do this on their own. When we did the vaccine, we had to partner with AstraZeneca. We had to work with the regulators. We had to work with the government. We had to work with the funders, etc. The university couldn't do it on their own. You know, and by working together, that vaccine has now been into 3 billion arms. So I think we just need to recognize that there is no one person, no one institution, no one organization that can tackle these challenges on their own. We have to come together. We have to break down boundaries. And I think we have to be humble about what are our weaknesses, because we can't be good at everything. And, you know, the reason we had to partner with AstraZeneca was, you know, Oxford University can't manufacture 3 billion samples of a vaccine. They can't distribute them. AstraZeneca, of course, are brilliant at doing that. So, you know, you need to recognize that we all have strengths, but we all have weaknesses. So we need to identify partners who have complementary capabilities. And I think if we work together, then we have a greater probability of success. It's all about creating a win-win. As long as all the partners get some benefit, then that's going to be a sustainable relationship. So I think there's no barriers. I think I always worry about coming up with the right ideas and bringing together the right people. And I think if we have the right ideas and the right people, I think funding will come. That's not the issue. I never worry about money. I always worry about people and ideas.
Karen, when we spoke ahead of today's event, you were talking about local politicians perhaps waiting for greater leadership from government, and your desire to see people, I think the phrase you used was show the art of the possible. We know we've got the potential here, so we're going to push ahead. We're going to push ahead ourselves and start driving this. Tell me what you've seen within the region.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, within the region, it's one of the things that attracted me. I came to Cranfield 10 months ago from Cardiff, and very much from an industrial background in university, very much looking for a university that collaborates. You know, that the collaboration is at the heart of it. And you know, in Cranfield and in the wider region, I saw, you know, the bedrock of the UK's innovation with Oxford and Cambridge at the edges. But I saw, you know, great collaboration in the ARC universities and the willingness to work together with ideas and the desire to bring in local politicians, you know, to make this a fantastic region to live, to work in, to do fantastic things in. And if you think about the example of the AstraZeneca vaccine, there's so many things that we can do together in exactly that same way, but we need the convening power. We need to get people together, and we need people to agree to focus on some really major things that we're going to do together for the benefit of the region. And you know, there's a whole region of things that I could talk for hours about on the skills challenge and the need to inspire people and the need to work with industry to produce and you know, distribute these great products. But you know, climate change, as Chaz rightly said, you know, biggest challenge that we'll face. But we're not doing it fast enough. So we need to convene more people. We need to work together to make sure that's at the basis of everything that we do.
We had a question submitted about that very topic, the sustainability of this. Has there been, this was asked by Jamie Young at Wait, so thank you, Jamie. Has there been a positive shift when creating a scientific superpower to making that superpower net zero and sustainable?
I'll go first on that. Definitely, you know, you see everything that we do now in universities, sustainability is the heart of it. So we don't think about solutions without thinking about, is this a sustainable solution? What is the what is the challenge in terms of sustainability. So that's at the heart of everybody's minds now. And, we think about that in terms of travel, we think about that in terms of distribution, we think about that in terms of the materials that we use when we invent new products. So everything is around about sustainability now. The fuels that we use, developing new aircraft that are electrified or hydrogen powered. This is really essential for the future of the planet.
Andrea, you're overseeing research partnerships with numerous universities. We had several questions submitted about how to strengthen those bonds between private sector businesses and academia. How have you seen the kind of relationships that ARM has with universities, both in the UK and elsewhere? How have you seen those develop over time?
Relationships with universities are absolutely critical to our business. For those of you that don't know ARM, we are a global technology business. We come up with designs for computer chips, which we then license to our partners. We don't actually fabricate or make anything ourselves, but as an example of our reach, last year I think almost 30 billion chips were shipped that had ARM technology in their heart. So I think it's about 97% of mobile phones sold in the world today have an ARM processor in their core. We're quite a small company in terms of headcount. There are 6,000 of us, about 3,000 in Cambridge in the global headquarters, the rest pretty much in the US, in Austin, and on the West Coast in California. So working in partnership is absolutely critical to what we do. We can't do it on our own with 6,000 employees. So we work with universities extensively on early stage technologies. We tend to collaborate with them on things that are quite a long way from market, but that really help us decide how to direct our own technology roadmaps. And obviously sitting in Cambridge and being close to Cambridge University is a central part of our collaboration strategy. We also work with universities very closely on the skills pipeline. Knowledge capital is something that really drives our business forwards. And we would actually say that that's the most important aspect of our collaboration with universities, talking about the skills that we see our industry needing coming down the road, because given our size and the way that we work with other companies, we need to bring graduates and trained technical staff into the pipeline across all the businesses we work with. So we collaborate with our commercial partners to talk about skills and talent and then try and transmit that down to universities.
Excellent. Richard, to bring in a property view here from you and colleagues at Pioneer, what are the clearest real estate needs in this space, and how can a business like yours help to address those across your portfolio?
Well, I think it's largely about collaboration. I mean, it's the technology transfer starts at the very beginning, starts at the universities themselves, then translates into the spin-out activity, translates into those SMEs, and those SMEs grow. I think for me, 5 years ago, 8 years ago when we started this business, this room itself would have had maybe 5 people in the room. 2 of which would have been my parents. Now, it's fabulous to see sort of the collaboration start, and it's that collaboration that it is still a nascent sector, but one of which there is increasing amounts of knowledge, and it's that knowledge that will help sort of translate into sort of more successful businesses going forward.
So what does that mean in terms of the kind of real estate that you need to provide for those companies?
It's fit for purpose. It's first off, it's understanding the type of facilities they require. And there are different types of science and tech and that translates into different types of facilities. So if they're an SME, it's sort of easy in, easy out leases, short term of nature because they're growing fast paced. So it's how you adopt and how you treat them as individuals, as customers, ultimately is the key point. But equally, that translates into later stage, sort of larger companies, and you have to work with them at every single stage. But fundamentally, it's about understanding the science and understanding what they are doing, because that actually translates into the facilities themselves.
We had a question submitted from Ian Bogle at Bogle Architects about whether the shift that's been seen recently from lab-enabled offices to office-enabled labs was going to continue. I don't know if that's something that you've seen take place within Pioneer's properties, whether it illustrates trends that you've noticed in the market.
We've started to see early stages of of that shift, but it's very, very early stages. I think, if you look at sort of our science parks across the UK, there's 11 of them. Even through COVID, they were, occupancy would vary from day to day, but between 20 to 50% occupied. The whole essence being that if you work in a lab, it's very hard to take your work home with you. But what we're seeing with the tech and side has started to infiltrate even more the sort of the life science and innovation R&D process. Whether that means that the amount of laboratory space within chemistry reduces down below 70% that it is now, or certainly within biology, where you have a typically 50-50 split, and maybe it goes the other way, 70 being offices, 30 being laboratories. We'll wait and see. That's certainly where the early startups are starting to sort of really augment with tech and really drive things forward.
Andrea, when we spoke before, you were talking about the digital infrastructure being just as crucial to touch on here as the real estate footprint.
Yes, I mean, obviously, in our business, digital infrastructure and connectivity is key, and I think the importance of connectivity in that sense has been illustrated to all of us during the pandemic, and people, at the start, upgrading home mobile, home Wi-Fi, people falling off Zoom calls and things to start with, and then as things gradually clicked into place, it's become something that I think most of us now rely on as part of our home office setup and as part of our daily lives and the way that we go about our leisure time and our work time at home and everything else. I think one of the comments that I would make in terms of bringing this to how we can work together and work across the region, and something that strikes arm when we look for collaborations, is often we're looking to engage with test beds and pilot initiatives where we want to trial new technology and talk about how things actually function when you put products or prototype products out into the environment. And at the minute, there are a plethora of initiatives across the region, things like Smart Cambridge and various initiatives around Milton Keynes, for example. But when we are looking for things to experiment with in the wild, it's the critical mass and looking for things that are bigger than those individual city points. So often, actually, we end up looking to the US and some of the large-scale city regions there that are of an order of magnitude bigger than the things that are happening here. And whether there is a potential opportunity for those individual silos of activities and the data reservoirs that are generated to be joined up to create something that is more attractive for industries such as ours and our industrial partners to look at engaging with.
I think that idea of looking overseas for inspiration is really interesting. What are some of your other thoughts on the panel about international cities and markets that we should be inspired by and looking to replicate ideas from, perhaps here?
Should I comment? Yeah. So I'll come to that in a moment. The comment I was going to make is that we all have to believe that the UK can be a scientific superpower. And I think collectively we need to be self-confident, and we need to be ambitious, and we need to be risk-taking. There's some things I like about the US that, I think they do have that moonshot culture. They're going to land somebody on the moon, they're going to cure cancer, et cetera, et cetera. And I still sense sometime in the UK and Europe, if somebody comes up with a big idea, there's immediately 10 people around them saying, oh, that's going to be too difficult. You'll never get the funding for it, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we have to be self-confident, we have to be ambitious, and we have to be risk-taking. And I can say, in the past couple of years, many people have said to me during the pandemic, abroad, in the US, Australia, China, why was Oxford on the news on a daily basis? And it would have been very easy for me to say, oh, we've got great people and we've got great infrastructure and we've got great resources. Well, frankly, Harvard and Stanford and Yale and Princeton have got even more infrastructure and resources, and they have equally great people. So it's not that. I think it's culture. And I think in the university, there's a culture of we need to work together. We need to come together if we're going to tackle some of these big global problems. And I think we need to do that nationally. So in terms of where do we need to learn from, I mean, I always look at Boston, and I look at Cambridge, UK, and I look at Stanford. And, in Boston, in my own space, healthcare, All the pharma companies are there. All the big pharma companies are there. They've got big hospitals, big universities, lots of venture capital, lots of angel investors. They have, in the US, there are 700 billionaires who put lots of money into those universities. There are these trillion-dollar companies that are putting lots of money into these universities. You know, I worry, if I have one worry, is how do we in Oxford continue to compete with some of those universities in the US? And of course, we have to compete with the universities in China. And in China, the governments are pouring billions into universities in a way that frankly isn't happening in this country. But nevertheless, I think we can learn from other places, but let's be self-confident, let's be ambitious, and let's be risk-taking.
In terms of government ambition, the commitment to have 2.4% of GDP pegged for R&D spend in the next 5 years, is that is that an achievable goal, do you think?
Shall I pick that up? I hope so, and in fact I wish it was more ambitious. But frankly, we've had these targets year after year and we never make them, so we need to work together to make them. And that 2.4% target is dependent on co-funding. It's not government funding. You know, the people think it's just government funding. It's about industrial funding as well. So we need to, and universities are actually great. I mean, not only are our ideas of our scientific ideas, but our ideas around leveraging funding and our ability to look across the funding landscape, bring people together, bring investors, bring industry, bring people together around a common aim and around a common purpose. So I think that it's not ambitious enough. I think it's achievable if we work together and focus.
Andrea.
Can I just comment on that? I think it is a great ambition. I would dearly like to see it achieved, but for businesses such as ours, our own investment in R&D depends on that talent pipeline that I was talking about earlier. And because we are a global business, if we don't get the talent through in the UK, we won't make the R&D investments in the UK, we will do it in the US. So it's predicated on having that supply of trained individuals coming through the door for us to then be able to make the investments in the research and development.
Just how tough is that hunt for talent for you at the moment?
Huge. I think we're facing problems on, well, not problems, but challenges on a couple of fronts. So the tech market is really hot for employment right now. And certainly in and around Cambridge, we have some of the biggest tech names in the world with Amazon and Microsoft, Google just down the road in King's Cross, which makes it easy for people to commute to. And we're also facing a skills change across our industry. AI, machine learning, smart technologies are requiring new skills in graduates coming through the door that we're talking to universities all the time about changing courses, altering courses, making sure we have people coming through to industry with the skills that we need going forward. So we're having those discussions. It's also competitive with the other companies in our sector and in our space. And with the world-leading institutions that we have in the region in terms of research and research graduates, and also the really excellent, more teaching-focused institutions that we have, we should be well placed to be, as a region, to be able to generate the talent to staff those businesses like ours in the region and to keep them in the region and making those R&D investments in the region as well.
Karen, what are the universities like at keeping that talent within the region?
In terms of the research talent, we are good at keeping our research talent as long as we keep them inspired and as long as we give them the right culture to work in. But frankly, you know, when you see countries like China, when you see places like Boston investing heavily in infrastructure and facilities, people are attracted elsewhere. You know, that's one of those things. And I think that it's actually quite stimulating to move around different labs. So I don't see anything wrong with that, but we have to then be able to attract them back. So it's about the investment in the infrastructure and the culture that we create for them to work in.
Anecdotally, Richard, what do you hear from tenants about this this battle to find talent, to bring warm bodies through the door at the moment?
It's never easy. I think it's also sort of both ends of the spectrum, from both the scientific sort of the degree qualified, highly skilled individuals, right down to sort of the lab technicians. The really with Brexit, the wave of a lot of Europeans going back to Europe has been has been a challenge for them to find those individuals. Interestingly, we've been hearing quite a few times recently that actually that companies are finding it possible. It's not easy, but possible to sort of still attract sort of the right talent to the UK, to their companies. But there's also an ambition in the UK for the homegrown talent to stay in the UK. Sometimes they are drawn to other locations, jurisdictions, for whatever reasons. But we still have that sort of the pull to retain people that we need to.
Yeah. How much of a worry is the UK no longer being part of the Horizon programme in the EU? What does that mean?
Huge worry.
Really?
Yeah, really huge worry. I mean, on all sorts of levels and in all sorts of ways. Mainly the fact that the UK has been a really huge player in European research programmes. I mean, we're seen as the leaders of many European research programmes. We're seen as the people who drive the innovation, drive the ideas, bring people together, our convening power. And to not have access to work with those great talents across Europe. And I know the UK government is putting in place plans to fund, give funding in the same way. It's not going to be in the same way. However good our funding system is here, there's nothing like the diversity of funding system that we've been used to. And you seek UK funding for certain projects, you seek Horizon Europe funding for other projects as appropriate, and losing the access to those talented people and the collaboration that it brings is really, really worrying.
Yeah, please.
Just a comment that sort of, across the world there are, hundreds of millions of researchers. But frankly, a lot of them are doing incremental research. And there are very few researchers who are great leaders. And there are very few researchers who are great innovators. And there are very few researchers who are great entrepreneurs. And I think if we want to tackle some of these big global challenges and create new industries, we need great leaders, we need great innovators, and we need great entrepreneurs. Now, the one thing I will say is that, and these are just recent stories, last week we were recruiting for a chair in Oxford. And I was talking to somebody who currently lives in the US. And he said he doesn't feel safe in the US. There's too many guns. And he was trained in Cambridge, UK, but he wants to come back to the UK. And then yesterday we were having a lunch with some colleagues, and they were saying Oxford is such a great place to live. And that is when you're a great entrepreneur or a great innovator and you're looking to set up your company, etc., you do want a great place to live. And people love the idea of living in London. People love the idea of living in Cambridge and Oxford, and I'm sure many other places, etc. So I think that's worth bearing in mind. I personally wouldn't want to live in China. I wouldn't want to work in the US. I love Oxford, and I love the UK. And so again, let's be proud of what we've got. I often think we like to have a whinge and a moan, etc. But there's a lot of good things. Let's build on those, and we can do great things together.
Do we not shout enough about what is great in these cities?
No, we don't. I think the US is much better at communicating their successes, and we should do that. ARM is an amazing organization, 6,000 people. I hope it grows to 100,000, but I hope most of them are in the UK.
Well, it's a cultural thing, isn't it? You talked about risk earlier, sort of from a spin-out activity, that the entrepreneurs sort of taking the risk, taking that leap of faith. I wonder, interesting, the Oxford themselves limited the amount of a spin-out activity to between 10 and 20% of the company, of that IP. Is that certainly what OSC have largely been driving? Do you see that as a sort of a step change in terms of where the risk and taking that leap of faith for an entrepreneur? Because there's enough headroom for the entrepreneur to take their risk and also attract venture capital investment as well.
So let me just sort of clarify that a little bit if I've got that right. So frankly, until July last year, there was a sense that the university, Oxford, was taking too much of the IP. So when an academic is creating a company, there was a perception that the university was taking 50%. And that perception was held by some of the big investors in the US. It wasn't true, but that was the perception. So last year what we did was we said, okay, if the university has contributed, so they've either provided the academic salary, provided postdocs, provided students, provided infrastructure, the university will take 20% and the academic gets 80%. Then we said if the university's made no contribution, no salary, no postdocs, no students, no infrastructure, the university will get 10% and the academic gets 90%. So the academic is getting either 80 or 90% of that founding equity. Now, and we did that, so it's a low amount for the university. We did it because we want to incentivize the academic, because they're the people who are going to come up with these great ideas and so on and so forth. So, now in Oxford, we're creating, last year we did 31 companies. That was more than any other university in the country. And I'm hoping with that change in policy, that number's going to shoot up even more. But I'm not worried about creating companies. Frankly, in Oxford, we could do 50 a year. What I'm more worried about is how do we scale them up to 1 billion? How do we scale them up to 10 billion, 50 billion, 100 billion? Because that's when they really start to create thousands of jobs, and that's when they really start to have an impact on the economy, but also on people's lives and the world. And that's what we need to focus on.
And there's no magic trick there, right? That's hard work and a lot of different stakeholders coming together.
I think it is just brilliant people being ambitious, working with other brilliant people and organizations, and we can do all of it. I mean, sort of, I just, the reason I gave that vaccine example, I mean, I still can't believe that we'd produced a vaccine in 9 months. And the university, they said during the pandemic, we don't want any money from it. We don't want any profit. So the whole vaccine was given to everyone in low, middle, high-income countries at cost price. So the cost of manufacture plus the cost of distribution. And then we said once the pandemic's over, so now we think, then AstraZeneca can start charging high-income countries, but they still have to continue to give it to low and middle-income countries at cost price. I mean, that is an amazing thing that the university did. I don't think any other university on the planet would have done it. And frankly, I don't think any company will do that deal ever again.
We had a levelling up focused question submitted from John Hunt at Enterprise Island. He asked, how important is the success of the Golden Triangle to other regions of the UK, and is their growth mutually compatible?
Yeah.
Who'd like to tackle that?
Shall I go first? I mean, you don't uninvest in other places when you invest in one place. And I think investment in one place forces, promotes collaboration further beyond the region. If you invest in a region, that investment doesn't just stay in that region; it grows outwards. So I don't see any holdback, to that. I think that we're a small country. We're not a huge country, so I don't see any problem with that at all.
I mean, our job as a university is primarily, it's 3 things, but it's one, to teach and train the next generation and produce great leaders, innovators and entrepreneurs. It's obviously to be a research powerhouse, and I think the third objective is we've got to create benefits for society and the world. Those are our 3 objectives. But the prime objective is training talent. And, what we do is our people we train, they go all over the UK. I mean, I've just lost one of my superstar PIs, and he's working in Newcastle. It's fantastic. But many of our alumni, of course, they're literally dotted all over the world. And that's great. We can use that network to influence the whole planet. It's amazing. It's wonderful.
Andrea?
So although our main site in the UK is in Cambridge, we do have small satellite offices in Manchester and Sheffield. The office in Manchester has, I think, about 200 people in it now, and is there primarily because the university is a brilliant source of highly qualified graduates for us. And the office in Sheffield has a number of tens of people and is there as a result of an acquisition. And I think as ARM hopefully grows and becomes more successful, we have ambitions to grow all of our sites. So the success in Cambridge will obviously be the primary focus because it's by far our biggest office. But as the business grows and develops in Cambridge, we would expect those other regional offices to grow as well and provide jobs and careers and opportunities where they're based. We have no aspiration to move those down to Cambridge. So the whole thing is interconnected.
Excellent. We're edging towards 10 o'clock here, but I just wanted to see, is there anyone in the room who'd like to ask a question, either to the panel as a whole or someone individually?
Yes. Just one for Chaz. This is Stuart Grant from Bryan. I'm just interested in how active venture capital firms are actually at the coalface in Oxford, like Google Ventures, Sequoia Capital. Are you seeing a lot of these firms coming to see you on a regular basis? Do they have physical presence in Oxford and vice versa?
So I think one of the best things that the university did was 7 years ago, we created basically a fund called Oxford Science Innovation, now called Oxford Science Enterprise. It was about £614 million, and it was purely to help Oxford academics translate their science, take it, create companies, etc., etc. Prior to that, we were doing maybe 5 companies a year, and like I said, last year we did 31. So that was step changing. I think the past 2 years, I think people have seen what we can do when we work with industry and government and regulators. So I'm seeing a real culture change now in Oxford. Many academics want to get involved in innovation and enterprise, etc. But Oxford Science Enterprise have been brilliant because although they've been funding these companies, they've also been helping us bring into Oxford many other investors, including some of the people that you've just mentioned. And I said the policy change that we did last year was partly to attract the really big investors from the US, because if we can attract really big investments, I'm talking 50, 100 million for some of these companies, then of course we can attract superstar talent from Boston and Stanford, etc., who can really scale up these companies quickly and create impact more quickly. I was delighted when Gordon did the IPO with Oxford Nanopore last year, 3.4 billion, etc. But, that company was set up in 2005, IPO 16 years later. It's too slow. We need to get it down to 10. We need to get it down to less than 10. So the way to do that is bring in lots of funds, superstar management teams, and then the companies will grow quickly. But the thing I worry about in Oxford, I want to see more investors. I want to see more global corporates. I want to see more innovation space. And I worry about more scale-up entrepreneurs.
Any other questions from the floor? There is a microphone moving around, although you did very well at projecting there. I was impressed just here.
Do you think one of the problems, Chris Bunn from Intelligent Buildings, do you think also one of the problems is with the strategy of ESG that we're focused very much on the E part and the S just gets pushed way down the agenda? And then when S actually is improved, there's not enough PR around the S piece that people can understand that there's actually something in it for them. And I'm thinking about young people. I did some STEM events with different people in the property industry, and young people are craving to move into these type of sectors, but they don't know where the opportunities are.
Well, again, I've seen a culture change amongst our students. So many students come to me now, they say, look, I don't want a traditional career. I don't want to do a PPE degree in Oxford and then go and work for Goldman Sachs and become the next chancellor. I don't want to have a boss. I want to be my own boss. And you're right, they are so passionate about some of the challenges I talked about. In 50 years I'll be gone, but my kids are going to have to pick up the pieces of the mess we've created, etc. They are so passionate about net zero and the climate emergency, and they keep coming to me and say, look, I want to learn how to be an entrepreneur, how to write a business plan, how I can become a great leader and how I innovate, etc., etc. And I think as universities, we have to provide that offering to our students. It's no longer just about getting them to cram stuff and pass exams or to become researchers, they need these other skills as well, including working in teams, breaking down boundaries. I mean, I spend my life breaking down boundaries inside the university, but also boundaries with external stakeholders.
Richard.
I mean, there's still a perception that life science or innovation and so on is still hazmat suits. And I think that's down to education, that it's not about that. And this is the role that real estate can play, is provide that that conduit, those outreach, those STEM days that we do ourselves across a number of our sites. It's absolutely important. That starts at grassroots, really at a young age when they're at school.
Excellent. We're a minute away from 10. I'm not going to let it run on past, because if I lose control of the timings in the first panel, the entire thing goes to pot. We'll have 5 minutes before our next panel. It's probably not long enough to go and grab a coffee, but you may just want to have a chat amongst yourselves while we get our next guests on stage. But for now, I hope you'll show our first panelists of the day your appreciation for their time and thoughts.
No, not at all.